In the dusty heart of nowhere, where tumbleweeds dance across forgotten roads and the desert stretches endlessly beneath a canopy of stars, the impossible becomes reality. This is the story of Jack Morrison, a weathered cowboy who thought he'd seen everything the American West had to offer until one fateful night changed everything. When a mysterious crash illuminates the midnight sky and Jack discovers something that shouldn't exist, he makes a choice that will transform his quiet town of Redemption Springs forever. What happens when an exhausted drifter shows mercy to a being from beyond the stars? What price does compassion carry when the government comes knocking? And how does a simple act of kindness ripple through an entire community, exposing secrets, fears, and the very nature of what it means to be human? Buckle up for a tale that blends Western grit with cosmic wonder, where the lonely expanses of the desert become the stage for humanity as first real contact with the unknown. This is a story about choices, consequences, and the courage to do what's right when everything is at stake. The sun had long since surrendered to the horizon when Jack Morrison finally steered his battered pickup truck onto the gravel path leading to his ranch. The engine coughed and sputtered like an old man with pneumonia, but it kept running barely. Jack was used to things barely working. His truck, his fences, his life, everything seemed held together by rust, prayer, and stubborn refusal to quit. At 53, he was too young to feel this old, but the ranch had a way of aging a man faster than time itself. Redemption Springs, Texas, wasn't much of a town, more of a memory of what a town used to be. Population 300 and dropping every year as young folks fled for cities with actual opportunities. The main street consisted of a general store, a diner that served breakfast all day because nobody could agree on what constituted lunch or dinner anymore, a gas station that was also the post office, and a bar called the Rusty Spur where dreams went to die slowly over cheap whiskey. Jack knew every crack in the sidewalk, every faded sign, every resident by name and by the particular way their lives had disappointed them. He'd inherited the ranch from his father, who'd inherited it from his father, stretching back through generations of Morrison men who'd worked this unforgiving land. Jack had never married, never had children to pass it on to. The thought used to bother him during those long nights when silence pressed in from all sides, but he'd made peace with it. Some bloodlines were meant to end, and maybe his was one of them. He had his horses, his cattle, and the vast emptiness that surrounded him like a second skin. The truck's headlights swept across the property as he pulled up to the farmhouse, a two-story structure that had once been white, but now wore the gray-brown color surrender. He killed the engine and sat there for a moment in the gathering darkness, too tired to move. His back ached from mending fences all day. His hands were raw despite the calluses that had built up over decades, and his soul felt as weathered as the land itself. That's when he saw it. A streak of light tore across the sky, silent at first, then accompanied by a sound like reality itself was being ripped apart. It was in a shooting star. Jack had seen plenty of those during lonely nights under the West Texas sky. This was different, larger, more deliberate. The light burned bright blue-white, almost electric, and it was descending fast, trailing what looked like flames or energy or something Jack had no words for. He was out of the truck before his conscious mind had fully processed what he was seeing. Boots hitting the dusty ground as his eyes tracked the object's trajectory. The impact came seconds later. Even from this distance, Jack felt a tremor that ran through the earth like the planet itself had flinched. A flash of light brightened the horizon, followed by another, then silence. The kind of silence that feels heavy, pregnant with consequence. Jack stood frozen, his hand still on the truck's door handle, trying to make sense of what he'd witnessed. Could have been a meteor. Could have been space debris. Plenty of satellites fell out of orbit these days. Could have been military, though the nearest base was 200 miles away, and they didn't usually drop things on civilian land without warning. Or it could have been something else entirely. The smart thing would be to go inside, pour himself a drink, and call the sheriff in the morning. Let someone else deal with whatever had just crashed into his slice of nowhere. Jack had learned long ago that sticking your nose where it didn't belong only led to trouble, and he'd had enough trouble to last several lifetimes. But curiosity and something else, something that felt almost like destiny, pulled at him. How many times had he stared at the stars and wondered what was out there? How many nights had he felt like the universe was too big and he was too small and nothing he did mattered at all? Maybe this was different. Maybe this was something that mattered. He climbed back into the truck, coaxed the engine to life, and turned toward the desert. The headlights carved a path through the darkness as he drove off-road, the vehicle bouncing over scrub brush and rocks, heading toward whatever waited in Dead Man's Canyon. The night seemed to hold its breath around him. 20 minutes of rough terrain later, Jack saw the glow. It pulsed with that same blue-white light, emanating from somewhere down in the canyon. He parked at the rim and grabbed the flashlight from his glove compartment, a heavy mag light that doubled as a weapon if needed. The climb down wasn't easy in the dark, loose rocks sliding under his boots, but he managed. At the bottom of the canyon, half buried in sand and surrounded by scorched earth, was a craft. There was no other word for it. Not a plane, not a helicopter, not anything that belonged to human engineering. It was roughly triangular, about the size of a small car, made of a material that seemed to shift and shimmer in the light metallic but also organic, solid but somehow fluid. Symbols or patterns covered its surface, glowing faintly with that ethereal blue light. Jack approached slowly, flashlight beam trembling in his hand. His heart hammered against his ribs, and his mouth had gone dry as the desert itself. This wasn't possible. This couldn't be real. Yet here it was, impossible and real and right in front of him. A section of the craft suddenly hissed and peeled back like the skin of some mechanical fruit, revealing an opening. Jack raised the flashlight defensively, though against what he had no idea. From inside the craft, something moved. It was small, maybe 4 feet tall, and humanoid in the loosest sense of the word. 2 arms, 2 legs, a head, but that's where the similarities ended. Its skin was a deep grayish purple, smooth and slightly translucent, with veins of bioluminescent blue running beneath the surface like circuitry. The head was larger in proportion to the body, with enormous eyes that reflected the flashlight beam like an animal's. No nose to speak of, just small slits. A narrow mouth that seemed more like a line drawn by an uncertain hand. The being stumbled out of the craft and collapsed onto the sand. Jack could see injuries, burns along one arm, a gash across what might have been its rib cage, leaking a fluid that looked silver in the moonlight. It raised one long-fingered hand toward him, and Jack heard something. Not words, exactly, but an impression directly in his mind. Help, please, help. Every instinct screamed at Jack to run, to get back in his truck and drive until he hit civilization, and then never speak of this night to anyone. But he looked at those enormous eyes, saw the pain and fear in them, and recognized something fundamental. Whatever this being was, wherever it came from, right now it was hurt and scared and asking for help. Jack Morrison had spent 53 years learning to ignore his better judgment, but he'd never been able to turn his back on something in pain. He'd pulled calves from difficult births, splinted the broken wing of a hawk, and once spent 3 days nursing a half-dead coyote back to health just because it seemed wrong to let it die alone. "All right," he said, his voice rough. "All right, let's get you out of here." Getting the alien back to the ranch proved harder than Jack had anticipated. The being could barely walk, leaning heavily against him as they made the climb out of Dead Man's Canyon. Despite its small size, it was surprisingly heavy, as if its bones were made of something denser than calcium. Or maybe it didn't have bones at all. Jack couldn't be sure and wasn't about to ask. The creature communicated in those strange mental impressions that felt like thoughts that weren't quite his own, conveying gratitude and urgency and an overwhelming sense of danger approaching. By the time they reached the truck, Jack's back was screaming in protest, and sweat soaked through his shirt despite the cool night air. He helped the alien into the passenger seat, where it curled into itself, those massive eyes watching him with an intelligence that was both fascinating and deeply unsettling. As Jack drove back toward the ranch, he kept glancing over, half expecting to wake up and discover this was all some whiskey-fueled hallucination. But the alien remained solid and real, occasionally making a sound like wind chimes, playing a melody that hurt Jack's ears. Its injuries continued to leak that silvery fluid, staining the truck's upholstery. Jack figured if he was already harboring an extraterrestrial, a ruined seat was the least of his problems. Back at the ranch house, Jack half-carried the being inside and laid it on his couch. The alien's skin had started to change color, shifting from grayish-purple to something more mottled and dark camouflage or distress. Jack couldn't tell. He stood there, hands on his hips, trying to figure out what the hell to do next. He had bandages and antiseptic for regular wounds, but what did you use on an alien? Was its biology even compatible with Earth medicine? The creature's hand reached out and touched Jack's wrist. The contact sent a jolt through him, not painful, but electric, alive. Images flooded his mind. A ship in orbit, sleek and vast, others of its kind. Then conflict flashes of light, explosions, the ship breaking apart. Escape pod launching. Earth growing larger in the viewport. Crash. Pain. And underneath it all, a name or designation, or perhaps just an identity. Zephyr. Zephyr. Jack repeated aloud, testing the sound. That your name? The impression he received felt like affirmation. The alien Zephyr pointed to its wounds with one long finger, then to a device strapped to its wrist, a bracelet of that same shifting material. Zephyr manipulated the device, and it projected a hologram, a diagram showing its body and highlighting certain areas. Next to it appeared images of various earth plants and minerals. Jack squinted at them, trying to make sense of the alien first aid manual. One image showed a plant Jack recognized, aloe vera. He had some growing in pots on the porch, holdovers from when his mother lived here and tended a garden. Another showed what looked like salt water. The third was harder to identify, but after a moment Jack realized it might be honey. The hologram demonstrated mixing these substances and applying them to the wounds. "You've got to be kidding me," Jack muttered, but he gathered the supplies anyway. What else was he going to do? If Zephyr knew what its body needed, who was Jack to argue? He mixed the concoction in a bowl, the combination creating a strange paste that shimmered faintly in the lamplight. When he applied it to Zephyr's wounds, the alien made that wind chime sound again, but softer, more musical. Relief, Jack understood. The pain was easing. They spent the next hour in a strange sort of communion, Jack tending to Zephyr's injuries, while the alien occasionally sent him impressions, gratitude, fear, and something that felt like sorrow. Jack learned that Zephyr had been part of a research vessel studying Earth from orbit. There had been others, but they were gone now, destroyed or scattered. Jack wasn't sure which. Zephyr had been alone when the escape pod crashed, and now it was stranded on a planet that wasn't its own, injured and vulnerable. "They'll come looking for you," Jack said, not phrasing it as a question. He didn't know who they were, more aliens, the government, whoever, but someone would investigate that crash. Someone always did. Zephyr's massive eyes fixed on him, and the mental impression was crystal clear. Yes, dangerous. For me. For you. Yeah, I figured as much. Jack sat back, wiping his hands on an old towel. Outside, the night pressed against the windows. Inside, his quiet life had been shattered as thoroughly as Zephyr's ship. So, what do we do? More images. Zephyr recovering strength. A journey across the desert. A place where Zephyr could signal for help from its own people. But it would take time for healing, time for traveling, time that Jack suspected they didn't have. How long? Jack asked. Zephyr held up 3 fingers. 3 days, Jack interpreted. 3 days before it could attempt to leave. 3 days before rescue might arrive. 3 days that Jack had to keep them both hidden and safe. He stood and moved to the window, peering out into the darkness. The ranch sat isolated, which had always felt like a curse, but now seemed like a blessing. His nearest neighbor was 10 miles away. If he could keep Zephyr hidden and avoid going into town, maybe they could pull this off. Maybe. Behind him, Zephyr made a sound, not the wind chime noise, but something else, deeper, more guttural. Jack turned to find the alien trying to stand, but its legs gave out. Jack caught it before it hit the floor, easing it back onto the couch. Easy there. You're not going anywhere tonight. Jack pulled a blanket over Zephyr, the gesture automatic despite the absurdity of tucking in an alien. You rest. I'll figure something out. But what? Jack moved to the kitchen and poured himself a generous amount of whiskey. His hand shook as he raised the glass. In the space of a few hours, his entire understanding of reality had been upended. Aliens were real. They were here. One was currently bleeding silver on his couch. And tomorrow, tomorrow the world would start looking for both of them. He downed the whiskey and poured another. Through the doorway, he could see Zephyr's form beneath the blanket, the alien's breathing, if that's what it was, slow and rhythmic. Jack had made his choice when he climbed down into that canyon. No going back now. He'd harbored the alien, tended its wounds, and in doing so had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. The night stretched ahead, full of uncertainty and danger. Jack settled into his chair with the whiskey bottle within reach and tried to prepare himself for whatever dawn would bring. His quiet life was over. The question now was whether he'd survive the chaos that would replace it. Outside, the desert lay silent under the stars that had witnessed humanity's entire existence and held secrets Jack was only beginning to understand. Somewhere up there, among those distant lights, was Zephyr's home. And somewhere down here, forces were already mobilizing, converging on this small corner of Texas where the impossible had crashed to earth. Jack closed his eyes and prayed for the wisdom to navigate the storm that was coming. He was just a tired cowboy who'd made a compassionate choice. But compassion, he was learning, could be the most dangerous thing of all. Dawn broke with its usual indifference, painting the desert in shades of amber and gold. Jack had dozed fitfully in his chair, jerking awake every hour or so to check on Zephyr. The alien slept deeply, its color stabilizing to a softer gray blue, the wounds already showing signs of healing that seemed impossibly fast. Whatever that paste had done, it was working. Jack made coffee and stood at the kitchen window, watching the sun climb. Everything looked normal, his horses in the corral, the fence line stretching toward infinity, the barn's weathered red paint glowing in the morning light. But normal was an illusion now. Normal had ended the moment the craft had torn across the sky. He was scrambling eggs when he heard the vehicles. Multiple engines, getting closer. Jack's blood went cold. He moved to the front window and saw them. 3 black SUVs kicking up dust as they approached down his long driveway. Government plates. Men in dark suits. This was happening faster than he'd anticipated. Zephyr! Jack hissed, moving quickly to the living room. The alien's eyes snapped open, immediately alert. We've got company. You need to hide. Now, Jack helped. Zephyr to its feet. The alien was stronger than last night, but still weak, and guided it toward the basement stairs. The basement was more of a root cellar, dug by his grandfather, full of preserves and old furniture and shadows. Jack cleared a space behind some shelves and helped Zephyr settle into it. Don't make a sound, Jack said. I'll handle this. Zephyr's hand touched his arm, sending a pulse of warmth and gratitude and something that felt like an apology. Jack squeezed the alien's shoulder in what he hoped was a reassuring way, then hurried back upstairs, closing the basement door behind him. The knock came hard and authoritative. Jack took a breath, adopted his most annoyed expression, and opened the door. 3 men stood on his porch. The one in front was older, maybe 60, with silver hair cut military short and eyes like chips of ice. His badge identified him as Agent Marcus Reeves, Department of Defense. The 2 flanking him were younger, harder, hands resting near weapons. Jack pretended not to notice. Jack Morrison? Reeves didn't wait for confirmation. We need to ask you some questions about an incident that occurred in this area last night. Incident? Jack leaned against the doorframe, blocking entry. Don't know what you're talking about. Was asleep by 9. Long day. Reeves smiled without warmth. Mr. Morrison, we have seismographic data showing an impact approximately 4 miles from your property. Satellite imagery confirms an object entering the atmosphere and crashing in Dead Man's Canyon. You didn't see or hear anything? Canyon's miles away. Could have been a meteor, I suppose. But no, I didn't notice anything unusual. Jack kept his face neutral. Years of poker at the Rusty Spur paying off. Why are you boys so interested? We get space debris falling all the time out here. This wasn't space debris. Reeves's eyes narrowed. Mr. Morrison, I'm going to be frank with you. We're looking for something dangerous. Something that may pose a threat to national security. If you're hiding anything. Hiding? Jack let irritation creep into his voice. On a cattle ranch, what would I be hiding? Look, Agent Reeves, I appreciate the excitement, but I've got work to do. Fences don't mend themselves. One of the younger agents leaned in to whisper something to Reeves. The older man's expression hardened. Mr. Morrison, we'd like your permission to search the property. You got a warrant? We can obtain one. Then I suggest you do that. Jack started to close the door. Until then, I've got nothing more to say. Reeves placed a hand on the door, preventing it from closing. Mr. Morrison, let me make something clear. Whatever crashed last night isn't human. It's extraterrestrial, alien, and if you've had contact with it, you're in violation of federal law and potentially in extreme danger. These beings aren't friendly. They're not ET looking to phone home. They're hostile, dangerous, and have killed American citizens. Jack felt his stomach drop. Was Reeves lying? Probably, but maybe not. He thought of Zephyr in the basement, those enormous eyes filled with fear and pain. Had it really killed people? Even if I believed you, Jack said slowly. Which I haven't seen any aliens on my property. Now, if you'll excuse me, your truck. The younger agent who'd whispered earlier spoke up, pointing toward Jack's pickup. The seat's stained. Looks fresh. Jack's heart hammered, but he kept his voice steady. Spilled oil yesterday. Been meaning to clean it. Mind if we take a look? Yeah, I mind. Get your warrant, Agent Reeves. Until then, get off my land. The 3 men exchanged glances. Reeves pulled out a card and held it out to Jack. When you're ready to tell the truth, call me. For your own safety, Mr. Morrison. That thing is dangerous, and it will turn on you the first chance it gets. Jack took the card without looking at it. Have a nice day, gentlemen. He closed the door and stood there, listening to their footsteps retreat, engines starting, vehicles pulling away. Only when the sound faded completely did he allow himself to breathe. His hands were shaking. Jack descended to the basement. Zephyr emerged from the shadows, and Jack felt a mental impression like a question. Gone? For now. But they'll be back with that warrant. We need to move you tonight. Get you to wherever you need to be. Jack ran a hand through his hair. Reeves said your people have killed humans. That true? Zephyr's response was complicated. Layered with emotions Jack struggled to parse. Sorrow, regret, but also something that felt like defense, misunderstanding. The images that came were fragmented. Humans attacking first, fear and confusion, Zephyr's people trying to escape rather than fight. So it was self-defense, Jack interpreted. They came at you. You defended yourselves. The impression felt like affirmation with caveats. The truth, Jack realized, was probably messy. Neither side fully right or wrong. Just scared beings making desperate choices. All right, doesn't matter now anyway. We're in this together. Jack helped Zephyr back upstairs. You heal. I'll get supplies ready for tonight. Where exactly do we need to go? Zephyr manipulated the device on its wrist, projecting a holographic map. A location appeared, highlighted in blue about 60 miles north, up near the border, in a region of desert so remote even locals avoided it. A place where Zephyr could send the signal without human interference. 60 miles. In a truck that barely ran, across open desert, while being hunted by federal agents. Jack laughed without humor. Well, I've done stupider things. Not many, but some. The rest of the day passed in tense preparation. Jack gathered supplies, water, food, blankets, his grandfather's hunting rifle he hadn't fired in years. He avoided checking his phone, knowing there'd be messages from Sheriff Clayton asking questions. Maybe from neighbors who'd seen the government vehicles. Everyone in Redemption Springs would know by nightfall that something was happening at the Morrison Ranch. As sunset approached, Jack felt the weight of what he was about to do. If they caught him, it was prison at best. At worst, Reeves had implied the government considered these aliens hostile. They might shoot first and ask questions never. Jack would be collateral damage, another casualty in a war the public didn't know was being fought. But when he looked at Zephyr, recovering strength with each passing hour, he couldn't regret his choice. Someone had to show kindness. Someone had to prove that not all humans reacted to the unknown with violence and fear. Maybe it was foolish. Maybe it would get him killed. But Jack Morrison had never been accused of making smart decisions, and he wasn't about to start now. Night fell. Time to move. Time to finish what he'd started, and pray they both survived to see tomorrow. They left at midnight, when the desert was at its darkest and coldest. Jack had loaded the truck with everything they might need, covered Zephyr with blankets in the passenger seat, and plotted a route that avoided main roads. The truck's headlights carved twin tunnels through the absolute blackness as they headed north. Zephyr sat quietly, occasionally consulting the device on its wrist. The aliens seemed stronger now, more alert, though Jack could sense an underlying anxiety in the mental impressions that occasionally brushed against his consciousness. They were both aware this could be a one-way trip. 20 miles in, Jack saw lights in his rearview mirror, headlights coming fast. His jaw tightened. We've got company. Zephyr turned to look back, those enormous eyes reflecting the distant lights. Jack felt the alien's fear spike, and his own pulse quickened in response. He pressed harder on the accelerator, but the old truck could only go so fast. The pursuing vehicle was gaining. Hold on, Jack muttered, and turned sharply off the dirt road, plunging into open desert. The truck bounced violently over rocks and scrub, the suspension protesting with every impact. Behind them, the pursuing vehicle, one of those black SUVs, followed without hesitation. Jack pushed the truck to its limits, weaving between boulders and Joshua trees, hoping his knowledge of this terrain would give them an advantage. He'd spent his whole life in this desert. He knew every arroyo and rise, every place where the ground turned treacherous. The government agents didn't have that advantage. A voice crackled over a loudspeaker. Mr. Morrison, stop your vehicle. This is your final warning. Like hell it was. Jack yanked the wheel hard left, sending them down a steep embankment. The truck's front wheels left the ground for a heart-stopping moment before crashing back down. Something in the engine made a sound like a wounded animal, but they kept moving. The SUV tried to follow but wasn't designed for this kind of terrain. Jack saw it in the mirror, hung up on a rock, wheels spinning futilely. He allowed himself a grim smile. First obstacle cleared, but there would be more. He steered back toward his planned route, checking the compass on the dashboard. 40 miles to go. They could make it. They had to. An hour passed, then another. The truck's engine was making increasingly worrying sounds, and Jack's hands ached from gripping the wheel. Zephyr remained silent, occasionally offering mental impressions that felt like encouragement or gratitude. Despite the danger, Jack felt a strange peace. For the first time in years, he had a purpose beyond mere survival. He was helping someone. It mattered. Then the helicopter appeared. Jack heard it before he saw it, the distinctive hump of rotor blades cutting through night air. A spotlight blazed to life, pinning them like insects on a collector's board. The loudspeaker boomed, impossibly loud. "Stop the vehicle immediately. This is federal law enforcement. Stop now." Jack didn't stop. He pushed the truck harder, engine screaming in protest. The helicopter paced them, the spotlight never wavering. Over the speaker, "Mr. Morrison, you're making this worse for yourself. Surrender the entity and you will not be harmed." Zephyr touched Jack's arm, and suddenly his mind was flooded with images. What would happen if they were caught? Zephyr taken, dissected, studied. Jack imprisoned, interrogated, disappeared. The alien's fear was so intense it made Jack's stomach churn. "I know," Jack said through gritted teeth. "I'm not stopping." The landscape ahead opened into a wide plain, flat and exposed, no cover, nowhere to hide. The helicopter descended lower, the downdraft kicking up clouds of dust. Jack could see figures inside, weapons pointed down at them. Then Zephyr did something unexpected. The alien manipulated the device on its wrist, and the truck's electrical systems went haywire. Radio blaring static, headlights flickering, dashboard lights dancing. Above them, the helicopter's spotlight died, replaced by sparking electrical failures. The aircraft waddled dangerously, pilot fighting for control as its systems crashed. "Jesus?" Jack watched in the mirror as the helicopter was forced to veer away, climbing rapidly to avoid a crash. Whatever Zephyr had done, it had bought them time, but it had also shown their pursuers exactly what they were dealing with. "Can you do that again?" Jack asked. The impression he received was negative. Once, maybe twice more, but the device was damaged from the crash. Using it drained Zephyr's energy rapidly. They couldn't rely on it. The next 30 minutes were the longest of Jack's life. Every shadow seemed to hide pursuers. Every sound of the struggling engine threatened to strand them. But slowly, impossibly, they ate up the miles. 20 left, then 15, then 10. The landscape changed, becoming even more desolate, a place where Earth seemed to give up on itself. Perfect for an alien rendezvous, Jack supposed. Perfect for secrets and desperate escapes. 5 miles out, the truck finally gave up. The engine seized with a final grinding death rattle, and they coasted to a stop in the middle of nowhere. Jack tried the ignition once, twice, but got nothing but clicks. They'd have to walk the rest of the way. "Come on," Jack said, grabbing supplies. "We're close." They set out on foot, Jack carrying a pack with water and his rifle. Zephyr moving with increasing confidence despite its lingering injuries. The night air was cold, sharp in Jack's lungs, and the stars overhead seemed brighter here, removed from even the minimal light pollution of Redemption Springs. Jack looked up at them and wondered which one was Zephyr's home. 2 miles on foot felt like 20. Jack's legs burned, his back ached, and exhaustion pulled at him with physical force. But Zephyr urged him forward with gentle mental encouragement, the alien itself showing surprising endurance. Finally, they reached the location marked on Zephyr's map. It was nothing special, just a flat area surrounded by rock formations that created a natural amphitheater. But Zephyr moved to the center and began manipulating the device on its wrist. The bracelet detached and expanded, transforming into a larger device that the alien placed carefully on the ground. Jack watched as Zephyr activated it. The device hummed, vibrating at a frequency Jack felt in his bones more than heard. Light erupted from it, shooting straight up into the night sky, a beacon, calling home across the vast darkness of space. "How long?" Jack asked. Zephyr held up fingers. 20 minutes, maybe 30. If the signal reached Zephyr's people. If they could respond. If federal agents didn't arrive first. Jack unslung his rifle and took up a defensive position. "Then we wait." The desert around them remained still, but Jack knew it wouldn't last. They'd lit a beacon visible for miles. Everyone would be coming Zephyr's people, and the people hunting them both. The question was who would arrive first. Jack checked his rifle, made sure it was loaded, and settled in to protect the alien he'd risked everything to save. Whatever happened next, at least he'd made his choice. At least he'd tried to do the right thing. In the end, maybe that was all anyone could do, make a choice and see it through. Consequences be damned. Above them, the stars watched and waited. Below, the earth held its breath. And between them, two unlikely allies stood together against the coming storm. The wait was agony. Jack's nerves stretched tighter with each passing minute, every sound amplified by adrenaline and fear. Zephyr sat beside the beacon device, eyes fixed on the sky, occasionally adjusting settings that meant nothing to Jack, but apparently everything to the alien's chances of rescue. 15 minutes in, Jack heard engines again. Multiple vehicles approaching from the south. He raised the rifle, peering through the darkness, and saw the distinctive lights of military vehicles, not just SUVs this time, but serious hardware, armored personnel carriers. This wasn't a retrieval team anymore. This was an assault force. "Zephyr, how much longer?" Jack's voice was tight. The alien held up one hand, fingers splayed. 5 minutes. An eternity when armed men were closing in. The vehicle stopped about 400 yards out, establishing a perimeter. Jack could see figures deploying, moving with military precision, surrounding their position. Spotlights blazed to life, turning night into harsh artificial day. Over a loudspeaker, Agent Reeves's voice echoed across the desert. "Mr. Morrison, this is your last chance. Surrender yourself and the entity. You're surrounded. There's no escape." Jack didn't answer. He kept the rifle ready, knowing it was useless against this kind of force, but unable to go down without at least the gesture of defiance. Beside him, Zephyr remained calm, though Jack could feel waves of anxiety emanating from the alien. 4 minutes, Reeves called. "That's how long until we move in. We don't want to hurt you, Jack, but we will if we have to. That thing you're protecting isn't worth dying for." But it was. Jack understood that now with crystal clarity. Zephyr represented something bigger than one alien, one cowboy, one desperate escape. This was about what humanity would become when faced with the unknown. Would they choose fear or compassion? Violence or understanding? Jack had made his choice, and he'd stand by it. 3 minutes. The soldiers tightened their formation, weapons trained on Jack and Zephyr's position. Jack could see snipers setting up, red laser dots dancing across the rocks around them. His hands were steady on the rifle, though his heart hammered like a war drum. Zephyr touched his arm, and Jack received a flood of impressions. Gratitude, sorrow, admiration. The alien was saying goodbye. Jack realized. Zephyr didn't think rescue would come in time. The alien was accepting its fate and mourning the human who died trying to save it. "Don't give up yet," Jack said quietly. "Miracles happen. I've seen a few. 2 minutes." Reeves called out coordinates and commands. The assault was being planned in real time, soldiers responding with professional efficiency. Jack wondered if they'd bother taking him alive, or if a sniper's bullet would end this before he could even process what happened. He thought about his ranch, about the quiet life he built and was leaving behind. No regrets, he decided. Better to die doing something that mattered than to live another 30 years of meaningless routine. His father and grandfather had worked the land their whole lives and left nothing but dust and memories. At least Jack would leave a story, even if nobody ever learned the truth of it. 1 minute. The soldiers began their advance, moving in coordinated units, using the rock formations for cover as they closed the distance. Jack raised his rifle, not aiming at anyone specifically, but making his position clear. He wouldn't start the shooting, but he wouldn't go quietly either. 30 seconds. Reeves's voice came one last time. "Mr. Morrison, please, don't make us do this." Jack's finger rested on the trigger, his breathing steady despite the fear coursing through him. Zephyr stood, the alien's small form seeming suddenly larger, more dignified. They faced the approaching soldiers together, two beings from different worlds united in this final moment. 15 seconds. Then the sky erupted. It wasn't an explosion. It was the opposite of explosion, like reality itself was being pulled inward. A point of impossible light appeared directly above them, expanding rapidly into a circular aperture that seemed to cut through the fabric of space. Through it, Jack could see something vast as ship, gleaming and organic, covered in those same shifting patterns he'd seen on Zephyr's escape pod. The beam that descended from the aperture was pure white light, and it encompassed both Jack and Zephyr in a column of warmth and energy. Jack felt himself lifting, feet leaving the ground, rifle falling from his hands as gravity released its hold. Beside him, Zephyr rose as well, arms outstretched toward the ship above. Around them, chaos. Soldiers shouting, weapons firing uselessly at the light, vehicles trying to reposition. But the beam was impenetrable, and within seconds Jack and Zephyr were rising rapidly, the desert falling away beneath them. Jack's mind reeled. He was flying. Actually flying. Being pulled up into an alien spacecraft by technology that made human engineering look like cave paintings. Terror and wonder competed for dominance in his thoughts, and wonder won by a narrow margin. They passed through the aperture, and suddenly Jack was inside the ship. The beam released them gently onto a floor that felt solid but slightly yielding, like standing on something alive. The space around him was enormous cathedral-like, filled with that blue-white bioluminescent light. Shapes moved in the periphery, other aliens, Zephyr's people, watching with those enormous eyes. Zephyr collapsed, and several of the aliens rushed forward, supporting their wounded companion. Medical devices Jack couldn't begin to understand were produced, scanning and treating Zephyr's injuries with swift efficiency. The alien turned back to look at Jack, and the mental impression that came was overwhelming. "Thank you. Saved me. Saved us. Thank you." Jack stood frozen, trying to process everything. He was on an alien ship. In space, probably, or somewhere else entirely. He'd just been rescued from certain death or imprisonment by beings from another world. His brain struggled to catch up with reality. One of the aliens approached him taller than Zephyr, with skin that shimmered between silver and blue. When it touched Jack's arm, he didn't receive impressions this time, but actual words, somehow translated directly into understanding. "You showed compassion when violence was expected. You protected one of ours at great risk to yourself. This is rare among your kind." Jack found his voice, though it came out hoarse. "Not that rare. Most people are decent when given the chance. Your people just caught us at a bad time." The tall alien's expression, if it could be called that, seemed to convey something like sadness. "Perhaps, but your governments fear us. They attack first, negotiate never. We came to study, to learn, to understand. We have been met with hostility." The 3 days Jack spent aboard the ship existed outside his normal understanding of time. The alien Zephyr's people called themselves something that translated roughly as observers, showed him things that rewrote his concept of reality. They saw their home world through holographic records, a planet orbiting a binary star system, where the sky shifted between purple and gold with the movements of two suns. Cities that grew organically. Technology and biology merged into something that was both and neither. They showed him the truth of their mission. The observers had been studying Earth for decades, watching humanity's progress with a mixture of hope and concern. They didn't come to conquer or even to make contact, not yet. They came to understand, to learn, to determine if humanity was ready to join the broader community of intelligent species scattered across the galaxy. Your kind is at a crossroads, the tall alien whose name translated as Meridian explained as they stood before a massive display showing Earth suspended in the void. You have achieved much, but you teeter on the edge of self-destruction. Nuclear weapons, climate collapse, artificial intelligence developing faster than wisdom. We watch to see which path you choose. And if we choose wrong? Jack asked. Meridian was silent for a long moment. Then, we mourn another species that reached for the stars but fell into darkness. It has happened before. It will happen again. Jack absorbed this, feeling the weight of it. But you think we might make it? You are here. Meridian gestured to Jack. You represent something important. When faced with the unknown, with the frightening and strange, you chose kindness. You risked everything to help Zephyr, expecting nothing in return. This capacity for compassion across species boundaries, this is what we search for. This is what gives us hope. Over those 3 days, Jack learned about the observers' technology, their philosophy, their view of the cosmos as an interconnected web of consciousness evolving towards something greater. He met others of their kind, each with unique perspectives on humanity. Some were optimistic, pointing to humanity's art, its capacity for love and sacrifice. Others were skeptical, noting the endless wars, the cruelty, the short-sighted destruction of Earth's resources. Zephyr recovered fully, the alien's injuries healing with astonishing speed under proper care. On the second day, Zephyr found Jack in one of the observation rooms, staring at Earth below. Will you tell them? The impression came clear, and precise. Zephyr's ability to communicate with Jack had strengthened. Your people, will you tell them about us? Jack considered. Who'd believe me? I'd be dismissed as a crazy old man who spent too long in the sun. Perhaps that is for the best. Zephyr settled beside him, both of them watching Earth turn. Contact must come when both sides are ready. Forced revelation causes fear, violence. Better to plant seeds, to inspire wonder, to let understanding grow naturally. So, what was all this for? Jack asked. If nothing changes, if I go back and stay quiet, what did we accomplish? Zephyr's hand touched his arm, and the impression was warm, profound. You changed me. I was afraid of your species, ready to believe we should abandon Earth to its fate. Then, you saved me. One human, acting alone, risking everything for a stranger. You proved that compassion exists among your kind, even when no one is watching, even when it costs you everything. That matters, Jack Morrison. That matters more than you know. On the third day, Meridian came to Jack with a proposal. We will return you, as promised, but we offer something more. A gift, if you will accept it. What kind of gift? Knowledge. Not technology. Your world isn't ready, and sudden advancement would cause more harm than good. But understanding. We can enhance your memory of these days, ensure you never forget what you've seen, what you've learned. And we can give you a way to contact us, should humanity reach a moment when revelation becomes necessary. Meridian produced a small device, similar to Zephyr's wrist bracelet but simpler. This will appear to human eyes as an ordinary object, an old coin, a stone, whatever you wish. But if the time comes when contact is needed, activate it, and we will know. We will come. Jack took the device, feeling its weight. How will I know when the time is right? You will know. Trust your judgment. It has been sound thus far. The return to Earth was carefully orchestrated. The observers used their technology to manipulate time and space in ways Jack couldn't begin to understand, placing him not in the present, but 3 days in the future, not at the site of his rescue, but at his ranch in his own bed, as if he'd been there all along. When Jack woke, sunlight streamed through his bedroom window. For a moment, he wondered if it had all been a dream. The crash, Zephyr, the ship, everything. But the device sat on his nightstand, solid and real. He picked it up, and it shifted, becoming an old silver dollar like one his grandfather used to carry. He slipped it into his pocket, feeling its reassuring weight. Jack made coffee and stepped onto his porch. The desert stretched before him, unchanged and eternal. His horses nickered in the corral. Everything looked exactly as it always had. But Jack knew better. Everything had changed. His phone buzzed with messages. Dozens of them, accumulated over 3 days. He scrolled through. Sheriff Clayton asking questions. Neighbors wanting to know about the government vehicles. Reporters from the state paper trying to reach him. But buried among them was one message that made him smile. A text from his nephew Thomas in Dallas, the only family Jack had left. Uncle Jack saw something weird on the news about activity near your place. You okay? Call me. Jack called. They talked for an hour, the longest conversation they'd had in years. Thomas asked about the government vehicles, the rumors flying around about alien crashes. Jack, deflected, said it was probably just military exercises. But he heard something in his nephew's voice: curiosity, wonder, the same quality that had driven Jack to help Zephyr. Thomas, Jack said before they hung up, you ever think about what's out there? Beyond all this? Sometimes, Thomas admitted. Why? Just keep your mind open. Keep wondering. World's bigger and stranger than we know. Never stop being curious about it. After they hung up, Jack stood on his porch and looked up at the sky. Somewhere up there, beyond blue atmosphere and wisping clouds, the observers continued their watch. Zephyr was up there, healed and safe. And now Jack carried their secret, their hope, their faith in humanity's potential. The weeks that followed brought their challenges. Federal agents came. Asked questions Jack answered with careful truths. Yes, he'd seen something crash. No, he hadn't investigated closely. No, he hadn't seen anything unusual. They searched his ranch, found nothing. Eventually left him alone one more unexplained incident to file away and classify. Redemption Springs buzzed with speculation for a month. Then life returned to its routine. People forgot, as people do. The world kept turning. But Jack didn't forget. Couldn't forget. He carried the knowledge of what lay beyond Earth's boundaries, of the observers and their mission, of Zephyr's gratitude and Meridian's wisdom. He carried the silver dollar in his pocket, a beacon waiting for the day when humanity would be ready for truth. And he changed, in small ways. He called Thomas more often, rebuilding bridges he'd let crumble. He spoke to his neighbors, really spoke to them, listening to their stories. He looked at the stars differently, now, not as distant points of light, but as homes, as promises, as possibilities. One evening, 6 months after Zephyr's rescue, Jack sat on his porch as sunset painted the desert in impossible colors. A shooting star streaked across the sky, but Jack knew it might not be a shooting star at all. He smiled and raised his coffee cup in silent toast. Thanks for the adventure, he said to the sky, to Zephyr, to the vastness that surrounded his small world. Worth every minute, the desert wind whispered back, carrying secrets and promises. Jack Morrison, weary cowboy who'd helped an alien escape, had discovered that compassion was its own reward, that kindness could bridge worlds, and that even one person's choice could matter in ways that echoed across the cosmos. His quiet life had resumed, but he was no longer merely existing. He was living, aware, awake to possibilities. And if the day came when the observers deemed humanity ready, when the silver dollar needed to be activated and contact made official, Jack would be ready. Until then, he had fences to mend, horses to tend, and stars to watch. Simple things perhaps, but profound in their own way. The universe was vast and filled with wonders, but so was a single human heart that chose courage over fear, compassion over hatred. Jack Morrison had seen the future, and he believed in it. That belief, more than anything, was the gift the observers had given him, the gift he would carry until his last breath, and perhaps beyond. The sun set, the stars emerged, and somewhere between Earth and infinity, beings watched and waited and hoped that humanity would choose wisely, because one of their own had been saved by a weary cowboy who simply decided to do the right thing. And sometimes, that's all it takes to change everything.